Pugin's Ghosts of the Future. Pugin had a number of fears that plagued him throughout his life, including debt, death, and civil unrest. Pugin abhorred the idea of dying in debt, so whenever he became unwell, he would try to settle all his accounts and ensure they were up to date. This fear stemmed mostly from his inability to successfully manage the financial side of his business, which at one time resulted in arrests for non-payment of rent. Thankfully, his father was able to convince two well-known architectural publishers to act as security for a bond to pay his debts, so he might be spared a night in jail. Like his mother, Pugin's father also liked to tell his young son dramatic tales, especially surrounding his escape from France during the Revolutionary Wars. Pugin therefore naturally feared revolutionaries, and an incident involving a man wearing a conical hat only increased these fears. Pugin was returning from a trip to a spa in Belgium, where he'd been staying with the Earl and Countess. Whilst moving about the carriage, he'd somehow managed to accidentally break a fellow traveller's pipe. The man was instantly filled with rage and demanded Pugin pay him 25 francs.
But dear sir, it was an accident. I'm happy to replace your pipe, but 25 francs is just too much to ask.
The man's eyes were full of rage when suddenly he pulled a knife from his coat and pointed it towards Pugin's throat.
If you do not pay me what I ask, you shall not disembark this train alive,
he threatened. Pugin wrote to the Earl of the incident as follows.
A ferocious-looking rascal in the comical hat, the stoush and a beard. A compound of both infidel and republican. Oh, soul came to help. The other passengers who saw the whole injustice of the business left me to this horrid ruffian.
This fear of revolutionaries eventually seeped into Pugin's work, especially when miners began striking near his home in Ramsgate, forcing him to fortify the house. Even defences were added to Alton towers, namely because of their proximity to the North Staffordshire coalfields. Additions included the construction of a Barbican gate, the creation of a fosse, and also the addition of a lookout tower to the octagon. But thankfully, none of them were ever needed. Of all Pugin's fears, death was his greatest. His first major loss was his wife Anne at 20. His father accompanied him to her burial and even shared a bed with his distraught son, so that he would not be alone in the night to experience what Pugin called the dread hour. But in later years, this fear would intensify once more. Often when Pugin would work and stay at Alton Towers, he would have the majority of the vast house to himself. With the Earl and his family away in Italy and the staff reduced to a minimum, Pugin sometimes found the place almost deserted and quite eerie. On an October night in 1849, he was staying in a room in a remote part of the towers, with a strong gale blowing outside. As if that wasn't enough, Pugin heard the sound of the bells ringing every few minutes, as though announcing a funeral. So strong was the wind as it blew through the openings in the chapel tower, that it had set the bells tolling.
You cannot imagine anything more desolate than this manor house,
Pugin once wrote to a friend. His fear at hearing the bell tolling was not without foundation, for bad omens had previously haunted Pugin at the towers just 5 years before. In August 1844, after a long day of drawing and meetings with contractors at the towers, Pugin retired to his room. He sank into his bed, closed his eyes, and pictured being home with his dear wife Louisa. Pugin missed his wife terribly. He longed to be able to look into her deep brown eyes that sparkled when she left, and to kiss her delicate expressive lips. He drifted off and was dreaming of Louisa's warm embrace, only to be woken by a cry. Pugin opened his eyes to see Louisa sitting in the corner of the dark room. She was holding her head as her whole body shook with sobs.
My love, whatever is wrong?
Pugin cried, running to her side. But as soon as he reached her, she vanished into thin air. Pugin woke with a start to find himself still in bed. It'd been nothing more but a terrible dream.
I must be missing her even more than I thought, but thankfully it was only a nightmare.
He reassured himself and settled down to sleep once more. Not an hour had passed when Pugin was woken by the sound of heavy footsteps in the room. When he opened his eyes and peeked out from under the covers, he found nobody there, but a large wooden box had been left in the middle of the room. Pugin got out of the bed to inspect the box, and to his horror, he discovered it was actually a coffin.
What beast would leave such a thing here in the night? What a cruel trick to play!
He shouted. Pugin was throwing on his coat so he might give the trickster a piece of his mind, when a faint whimper came from behind him. Pugin paused. He walked back to the coffin and hesitated before slowly removing the lid. Inside lay a beautiful young woman, ashen-skinned and cold. It was Louisa.
No!
He cried, waking himself from yet another nightmare. This time, however, he dared not go back to sleep, for his mind constantly replayed each awful dream.
I cannot stay here another moment. I must go home at once. I cannot bear to be away for another day from my beloved.
As soon as the sun was up, travel arrangements were made, and Pugin headed to the train station. He was checking the time on his pocket watch when he heard a man further down the platform cry out his name.
Mr. Pugin! Mr. Pugin! I'm so grateful to have found you sooner than anticipated. I've been sent to urgently bring you news from home.
The man handed Pugin a letter.
What news is this?
Pugin asked.
I'm sorry to tell you, sir, that your wife has been taken gravely ill, and if you wish to see her alive again, you must return home immediately.
But how can this be? She was in good health and spirits when I left. I don't understand.
Pugin returned homely as quickly as he could, but throughout his journey he struggled to suppress the visions that had haunted his dreams.
They were just nightmares,
He told himself.
a coincidence and nothing more. Dreams cannot seal out fate. Only the Lord can do that.
Dreams may have not sealed poor Louisa's fate, but they did end up predicting it. For when Pugin returned home, he found her in a terrible way. Sitting by her bedside, he held her hand and told her that she would forever have his heart. But tragically, his love was not enough to save her, and Louisa passed away. Once again, Pugin was thrown into the depths of grief and would forever remain fearful of losing those he loved most. So now you can understand why, when the bell tolled that stormy night, Pugin was so fearful of what it might foretell. And maybe he was not the only one, for that bell no longer hangs in its belfry, but instead rests on the floor of the east entrance tower, where it can toll no more.